All right. Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Engineer Podcast. I'm your host, Alvin Zepeda, and tuning in from Washington, D.C. And for today's episode is a special one. I have a special guest with me, and I'll give her my, and I actually want to give her the opportunity to introduce herself, share where she's from, and yeah.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Kathleen Ellis. I'm currently residing in Southwest Georgia in a small town called Leesburg, Georgia. Alvin asked me to be on today. I'm part of a training program called Wayshowers College. I have spent the last 50 years in the arena of self development. I also have a professional background as a physical therapist. And my motivation in working with human motivation is that I wanted to help people before they get sick, before they're in the hospital, and really help people with how to stay vigorous, vital, and involved in life as long as they still have breath. So I'm excited about the opportunity to share with Alvin and have a discussion here and hopefully be of service to someone.
Awesome. Yeah. And for those that don't know, like Kathleen's a dear friend of mine. We've known since maybe I think 2019 when we first connected, and I think it might have been the international regrouping. It's an annual retreat that Way Shores College puts together. It's a program for like about a week or two, and it was I think in Kauai, I believe. I believe that was the first time, if I'm not mistaken, Kathleen. Was it, or was it might have been maybe
It
a course or
was.
something? Okay, and so
It
and ever since
was.
then, yeah, and so and you know, Kathleen is a good friend of mine. She's a colleague of mine and also a mentor of mine of mine as well too. And so and we connect, periodically just to check in and being of service, in that way and just working together in the mentorship. So because it's your first time on the podcast, Kathleen, could you share a little bit about your spiritual journey and what led you to where you are today?
Okay, well, I think I was a pretty young child when I started to be aware of sort of gut feelings. I just knew sometimes what was in my best interest or wasn't. And luckily, when I was 15, this book attracted me. I really believe it might have just sort of fallen off a shelf, but it was called The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And that book changed my life from the standpoint that my parents were more the worrier type and what will people think type and that kind of thing. And here was somebody talking about, you can set goals, you can be positive, you can be a possibility thinker. And so I started to live my life from that point of view. It was a time in my life where the teachers were asking us to write sort of a report of what we wanted to do after high school or what career. I actually chose something called actuary science. I have no idea why I chose that, but as I was investigating that, my girlfriend's mother was telling her about this career called physical therapy. And I knew that I wanted to teach people something, but I also observed in my own classroom that I was in with my peers that the name of the game at that time was to get the highest grade without showing any effort. And they didn't really want to learn, where I absolutely wanted to learn more and more. And so I thought, well, I don't know if I want to really teach people something they don't want to learn. Mother was telling her about the career of physical therapy. I thought, well, that might be something that people would want to learn. If they broke their leg, they would want to walk again, or they would want to be able to move. And in general, that's really how the career of physical therapy that I've actually participated in for the last 52 years has been. Most of the time, people do really want to get better and participate and be able to move and get back to independent living. There are some that don't, but the good news is they have the ability to say no. Or the insurance companies basically say no if they're not progressing, they're not going to be continuing to pay for the service. So it's self limiting that way. People either graduate and improve or they don't, and their insurance company makes for an end. But in the spiritual world, the reality is because it's somewhat of a self pay type of thing, people are seeking answers for whatever is in their life bothering them. what we might gain. And, they're willing to seek out those answers and help the person who's mentoring them or providing them with the answers to funnel their funds that way. So that is great. And then at a certain point, and we actually say this often in our community sessions, let this be a watering hole. And when your thirst has been quenched, you're free to go. So it's really all about that spiritual freedom. Now, for me, I'm super curious and I really wanted to learn, and I keep learning, constantly expanding my sort of self mastery. I'm continuing to stay involved and learn additional skills that I can pass on to others in tools and techniques for relaxation. Even back in the early 70s, when I got involved in the career of physical therapy, they were talking about how stress was a major cause of people's health issues. And so I was actually in college. I found out that I could take additional classes for no additional money after a certain number of credit hours. And I actually took relaxation training as a college student. I didn't know later on that that relaxation training was setting me up for not only being a better healthcare provider, but also in the arena of being a spiritual educator. Helping people to learn how to relax is huge and a real challenge because depending on their inflow diet of today's news and things around them, and if a person's really sensitive, it's even more challenging because they're starting to pick up on everybody else's worries and fears and anxieties and think it's their own. So, helping people to learn how to sort of come back to themselves, their innateness, is part of what my goal is to really be of service in that arena.
Okay, I see. Yeah. And it's interesting, like, a lot of things that you were talking about, I was thinking about the whole like, when you mentioned being a physical therapist, and it's like, and helping your clients achieve a goal, right, to just come back, to be able to move, to recover from any injuries, anything, the injuries that perhaps we could equate with like the storms or the things that could come, that can happen in our lives, the ebbs and flows. And it's like there's this like element of like resilience that I hear you're sharing, that I think it's important. And I know definitely for myself, even like in the context of physical therapy, for sure. Like I remember one of my big ones, my one of my journeys and lessons was, when I tore my ACL. Even though it was something that I probably could have prevented and had like, you know, but I did what I did, and I ended up having this journey of like being with my physical therapist, and I'm really grateful for the qualities that that I sense in you. Also, like she had as well too, and it's something that's been super helpful. So like, and I hear this also, this word of like practicality, when it comes to what people want, what people desire. If people want this, they want solutions and things like that. We all have our own unique challenges and things like that. And something I was all interested to ask is like, if you had to like sum up your like spiritual philosophy in just a few words, what would they be?
You are one decision away from a better life for yourself. I think we have to constantly tune into what is it that I want instead of focusing on all the stuff we don't want. We're real good at that. We have the media that really helps us do all of that, but we need to focus on what is it that I really want. And then there's this other thing called spiritual needs. To really achieve what we want, we really need to make it a need. That's essential for us. And when we do that, that's that one decision away. Because our needs, a lot of times, some of the basic needs we all share, like we all have to have air, we all have to have water, we all have to have nourishment. It's extremely helpful to have a secure building or house or shelter, those kinds of things. Those are needs. But from a spiritual point of view, we also need belonging, we need love, We need adventure. We have a spiritual need to learn and grow. All of us have that inner need. When it's like trees, if they stop growing, they start dying.
Uh,
So, and then what's interesting is, the time is just a construct that we have for our convenience on this plane.
mhm.
That's why our dreams are so weird. Because sometimes we're a little kid, and then the next time we're older, and it flips all around and stuff because the other realms don't have time. But we have time. We measure things, again, more for our convenience than anything else. I saw a sign once that said, time is God's way of keeping things from not happening all at once. But, that's just planet Earth. When we go to sleep at night, we're in different realms and that time doesn't exist.
I like that when you mentioned like the signs are just like happen so that things don't come out all at once type of thing, because I think definitely things can feel overwhelming at times, and especially like in this day and age with like technology and where we are in human civilization. It's interesting times that I think that, from my perspective, what I see is all in right now and how much of a greater need it is to like really come back and, connect with ourselves. And you definitely mentioned some good points about like the need to, and the wants. And I think it's one of those things. I know for myself, it's like there's this element of like sincerity that where I need to have for myself to just say like, okay, I think part of it, a huge part of it, is like actually setting aside the time to carve out of my time to just check in with myself, and I try to practice doing that on a daily basis. And, and I'm just curious on that connection to self, in the midst of with a lot of distractions and stuff happening all over the place. What kind of practices do you do, or what works for you as you connect with yourself and as you're moving through the day and your opportunities? What kind of practices do you use to help you stay grounded with yourself?
Well, one of the things that I've learned that I think is really effective is that I set an intent for the day.
Mm.
I sort of reflect on, and if it's really in my best interest to actually do this the day before, but to tune into that pivot point, as I might use it. And using that pivot point is sort of a way of naming the curriculum that I'm learning and growing in as the day progresses. What am I learning about X as the day goes on? And that helps to keep me grounded. The other thing has to do with taking the time to recenter myself multiple times throughout the day. Like if I'm getting in my car, we have in our program, we have this healing technique called spiritual cleansing. It's very simple, 4-step process. It takes less than a minute, maybe two, and it allows me to sort of come back to myself. That's why I call it centering. And I feel everything is energy. So I feel like the Native Americans who hundreds of years ago used to send their energy ahead on the trail that they were following. As I drive my car, I'm sending the energy ahead on the path that I'm going to, the environment I'm going into, and that kind of thing. And I've had experiences when I didn't do that. And I don't know if you were with us that time, Alvin, but we were at an international retreat in South Florida. We decided to go out to dinner, and we had had a very enthusiastic, vibrant day.
Mhm.
And we went into this restaurant and we didn't send our energy ahead. And our energy was so high that it caused one of the waiters to drop a whole tray of food. As soon as that happened,
Wow.
we realized what was going on. That we were sort of messing up the frequencies in a way. We needed to
Mm.
sort of necessarily come down to the level of the people, but not have our higher energy be a shockwave, which is what had happened. So everything is energy, learning how to work with energy. And that gets back to that sensitivity. A lot of times, because we're really sensitive, we pick up what other people are thinking, experiencing, and think it's ours. But
Mm.
we have learned to teach people how to communicate with their personal team of spiritual helpers. You might call them archangels, you might call them the Holy Spirit, but we have a team of master souls who are in a mentoring program with us. Before we came here, we picked them because they would have expertise in what we've come to do. Like we chose them because we said, oh, I want to learn how to do X more. And we picked out a master soul that we knew could help us in those areas. And if we came to work with not that much, not with many people, we might only have one or two helpers. But if we came to work with people, people keep changing their mind. You know, you need a lot of help, in coordination and communication and in insights and all these different areas, just like every other business. And we have help in those areas and learning how to really trust it. It's almost like we designed a trip here this lifetime and we packed everything we needed in advance. That part of the work that I do and the others who have trained with Wayshores colleges, we're helping people get back to the reality is they're perfect for what they've come to do. I can't do what you've come to do, Alvin. You can't do what I've come to do. Each of us have a piece of the puzzle and help other people find their piece of their puzzle, what we would call their life purpose. And we can help them start using tools to live their life more from that priority. You mentioned that word overwhelm. And that happens when we don't set priorities, when we're not, sort of loyal to what we've come to do and get sort of involved in maybe somebody else's goals. I know I learned that lesson the hard way. I knew I wanted a different car. A significant other in my life, he actually had a goal of having a Cadillac. And before I knew it, I owned a Cadillac, a used one. And
Mm,
I'm like, how did that get here? I had
mm.
no desire to have that big kind of car. Within a year, I sold it. Of course, I maybe lost some money on the whole thing. But it was very obvious to me that I had been following through with his goals and not mine. So that was a very important lesson that it's carried with me to pay more attention to, again, what is it that I want?
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I think, what stood out to me was when you're sharing, definitely when it comes to like navigating energy, like energy's everything. And, I feel like when I talk to people, it can come off as kind of woo, but it's like, but it's one of those things. It's like to experience it really is from that experiential point of view and then connecting the dots and reflecting like, oh, okay. So this is like understanding like I think one of the things you're talking about that I think is so important what the college teaches is like when we talk about energy is like the mechanics. What are the mechanics at play, right? Because we have the natural world, the physical mechanics like gravity and things like that. We have seasons, we have weather and stuff like that. But it's not too often that people talk about the spiritual mechanics at play. So like even just navigating through thoughts and how we are not our thoughts. I mean that to me was like a huge like revelation to me. It was something that helped me liberated me from myself because I would take on thoughts. Like I was like under that whole thing of like, oh, if it's in my head, if I'm thinking it, it has to belong to me. And then I start identifying with something that has nothing to do with me. That's not a part of who I am, but rather it's like, it was almost like I'm identifying with the experience, right? It's like these thoughts that happen, these are just experiences, but they don't define me as a soul or as a spirit in this human physical vehicle. So and yeah, it's an interesting thing to for myself and working and navigating on a daily basis, mind you, and it's being so super sensitive. And and I'm curious because I know you mentioned like a lot of things, and especially when one of the things that the Wayshores College teach in terms of like mindset is like looking at life as a school, and that everything that happens in our daily lives are all parts of our own life lessons, and that there's like a bigger picture in the works of our life's plan and things like that. I'm curious, what's a lesson that keeps showing up for you even after your decades of your work and your, your growth? I'd like to know, what's that for you?
Oh, before you even asked the question, I already got a picture of one experience that I had back in the 80s. I was doing home health in South Florida, and the company I work for, if you made a certain number of visits, then they would start to pay you on a contract rate. After that, you'd already earned your salary. And so I could almost double my salary if I was efficient.
Mm,
So I'd start out Monday morning with the goal of I'm going to make this many visits, not cheating anybody. I was providing quality, but
mm,
I was going to be as efficient as possible. And luckily, my territory was not so huge, like driving 100 miles a day or something like that, that I could indeed accomplish seeing possibly 10 visits a day if I started early and worked a little late. But the reality was, one time this is maybe even before cell phones, but I had come out of a person's house. She lived in an apartment building. I was parked in the parking lot. Behind me, there was a long driveway, and I had a Persian van that isn't the easiest to see. And I was sitting there thinking about 3 visits away. In other words, I wasn't thinking about what I'm doing right that moment. And I didn't realize somebody pulled in behind me in the driveway and stopped to let out someone. And so
mm,
when I went to back up, I hit them. And it was just a small fender bender. And I ended up, paying some money to get it fixed. And I asked my angels, okay, why did that happen? I already knew that if you have an accident, I don't care if it is where you fall down or if it's a motor vehicle thing or whatever, you are not in your right timing. That's the reality of it. So my guide said, well, what were you doing? I was like, okay, yeah, I'm thinking about 3 visits ahead, 2 hours ahead. And they said, well, you can continue to have that habit of focusing on the future and have a bigger accident where you can change. Well, I chose the chose the change, and it still happens. It's easy to fall into that focusing so much about what I want in the future, I forget to live and enjoy the now. People do that
mm,
all the time. But the reality is now is all we have. We can regroup and learn from the past. That's important. We can plan for the future, but our reality is in the now. And that I have to catch myself sometimes planning about what I'm going to do in so many days or that kind of thing. And yes, I can magnetize it and I can focus it and I can, really work on manifesting that goal for the future or whatever. But at the same time, I am living in the now. And I need constant reminder to be in my now. And that's a real challenge in today's society.
mm. So it's interesting as we were talking. I was hearing components and elements of like alignment, and of course, you even mentioned earlier about purpose. And uh, a question I have is, what does it feel like to you when you know you're in flow with your purpose?
Life works like clockwork.
Mm,
I went on a retreat this last week. It was all about being in the slipstream of life, which until last summer, I didn't even know what slipstream really was. But it's really being in the flow of my own energy. And I was in that retreat all week. And then that day I left, and the traffic in Florida is really, really, this time of year, really hard. There's lots of slowdowns and you can't get to where you want to go in an easy manner. I took somebody to the airport and there was a sign that said 3/4 of a mile exit to the airport. I was all prepared to get over, but the reality was there was so much traffic, the other cars were already lined up for that exit. And it wasn't like just a lane going off, it was a whole split in the road, and I was not in the right space. So I had to make the decision to just go on, turn around, and come back. And as we were driving by, we noticed that the cars that had gotten off, they were stopped. There was so much traffic to go to the airport that if had we gotten off, we would have been delayed a significant amount of time. The reality was because we went up a little bit, turned around, came back from a different direction, it was easy peasy. We had no delays whatsoever, and I'm sure that we were saved from that long
Sure.
queue. So the biggest thing I'm thinking about is sometimes when it appears at the moment to be a mistake, I'm in the wrong lane, it's really in the right lane. I'm really in the right spot doing, and that happened to me again later in the same day in a different part of Florida, where I couldn't get over because the other people sort of knew ahead they were already going to be going left, and the left lane was already totally full. So I'm like, okay, I learned earlier, I'll just go around the block. And sure enough, it was easy then. It wasn't any kind of waiting queue at all. I could easily merge in. When I went around the block, I got to the same place. So that's a lot of learning how to be in that flow, the slipstream of our own making. It's when we're living and making that choice, that decision to be living our purpose, being effective in what we do, and having sense of inner freedom. Even the people who were prisoners of war or the people who were in World War II incarcerated, they all talked about that nobody could control their mind. They might have lost the ability to move around freely and that kind of thing, but inside they had that control. It's inside all of us. We have an inner freedom that's, unique.
Okay. Mm. Yeah, that inner power within, is just like it's funny how we're in a world where it's like it's so much of like this intellectual, like, oh, we have to look outside for ourselves, gotta find that thing outside. And it's like you can see this is so many like distractions and things like that out in the world that it's crazy. It's like compared to what we teach and stuff like that, and then what we see out in the world, it's like why I actually believe and know like people who are doing the inner work, whatever practice that they do is something very vital and necessary. 100% I agree with you, and you're sharing about that. So now I was so some questions, to kind of wrap us up to a close here. We definitely share a lot of good things, and I'm sure for the people that are listening, you're probably tuning into this because curious and wondering about something to help you in your own spiritual journey. A question that I have for you, Kathleen, another one is just if someone listening, feels stuck on their path or unsure where to start, what's one simple step they can take today?
Take a moment to just breathe and tune in to their own inner truth and just sort of let that past be in the past and then the future to be confident, trust like the bird. The bird doesn't sit there worrying about whether it's going to have more food or whatever, it just is. So just take that moment to just breathe and allow who you are and your uniqueness and to be trusting that you're in the right place at the right time doing the right thing.
I like that trust. Boy, do I know I need some of that in my life. I always enjoy our conversations, Kathleen. I feel like, whenever, whether it's like we're just talking or, in the context of just like a little mentoring, work helping me work through my stuff or even just getting into in social situations, just having conversations. I definitely, appreciate connecting with you. And it's just like, I've always, I'll never forget, the time when we had this one, there was that one international retreat we went to, that you were sharing up in the front. And I remember, and this is, kind of tuning into my sensitivity, something that which we all have, what we call psychic abilities and things like that. And I know for me, one of the interesting experiences I remember when you were standing up there and sharing, I remember seeing like your aura, and I can remember seeing like almost kind of like looking like spikes of light from your aura, just kind of like there's almost like this like projection. That was a very interesting little imagery that I saw, but it was like very expansive and it was like very dynamic type of thing. And so that's something that I definitely, I appreciate, when you share, it's like there's this like this charisma, there's this way of just like, really embodying just like in this little bit of a dance in many ways, and just like this pure enjoyment of just sharing and really being of service. So I definitely, appreciate like so many things. I appreciate you so much, Kathleen. And so to wrap us off, just one final question, and is what's something on your mind lately that's been inspiring or challenging you?
I think probably the reality is there's a lot of change in the world, and there's anything in life that I resist persists. So if I resist change, I'm actually just making more trouble for myself. So recognizing that in change, whatever it is, that there's the positive qualities to it, and I can embrace change. And I definitely don't want to be in the same spot that I am today next week. I want growth. I want expansion. I have to go through change and transformation to get to that spot. And it isn't always going to be super comfortable. It's very comfortable in the comfort zone, but the reality is there's in the comfort zone. So to grow and expand, and that's my part of my purpose, and we all share that. I need to go through change, adopt it, embrace it, and bless it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing so much, Kathleen. There's so much. I feel like as you were sharing, like in my mind, I was like, oh man, we could, we could, we could talk about so many things. Like there's a lot of simple topics, but we can take it really deep and really far. And that's like I think that really speaks to how much depth the our experience here, who we are as a soul. So, but I know we wanted to just keep this very short and sweet for our listeners here. Anyway, nevertheless, Kathleen, I appreciate you for coming on, and for those listening, for tuning in. If you made it this far in the episode, I hope you got something out of it, and perhaps you might have listened for something inspiring. And I would strongly suggest and encourage, like any inspiration, anything that came up, to just take action. I think that's one of the things that's very powerful. It's like we can be very inspired, we can receive inspiration, and I definitely receive a lot of it. But I think it's definitely very powerful to take action on the inspiration as well too. Something that I wish to impart, if anything. So I appreciate your time and attention for tuning in. And Kathleen, anything else you want to share before we
Yeah,
finally leave?
I do have a website. It's called live in the number two worlds.com. And the reality is, we live in two worlds. We live in that internal spiritual world, and we live on planet Earth, that external world. And we have to balance both of those. So live in two worlds.com. And you can contact me through that website. I'd be happy to answer any questions people have there. There's one-on-one services that are available, consultations to really assist a person to start discerning what it is that they want, what their life purpose is, what their resources are. And there's even ongoing community sessions that can help them to start getting through all the different layers that's not them, back to their essence of who they really are.
Hmm. Awesome. Okay. Well, perfect. Great. And I'll be sure to add your information too in the show notes. So for those listening, to check out the show notes if you wish to connect with more with Kathleen Ellis. So there we have it, y'all. So this has been another episode of Spiritual Engineer Podcast. I'm your host, Alvin, signing out. And take care, my friend.
Thank you, Alvin. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good day.